when you have a project that you say you're going to put on pause for a day or two, a day eventually becomes a week and then a month. That's what happened to this little project. In Season 3 of Episode 3 of the Clone Wars, we're introduced to a couple clones that we've never seen before, and unfortunately this would be the last time we ever see them, with Captain Keeli being in charge of them alongside General Master Gundy. This is where we see the last stand of Captain Keeli and Gundy, and even though they're only in one episode, we're given the phrase, "Let's make the end memorable," and to be honest, I have never forgotten these clones ever since I was a kid. So, that's what happened to these clone troopers, and this is why I want to make them. Alright, so now that you know who Captain Keeli is, he definitely was not a clone trooper that I ever forgot. So, with all that being said, let's get to this project. Alright, so going back to basics, 3D printing. I made this helmet in 3 pieces, I think one of which was printed on the Ender 3 and the rest were on the CR10. Now, before I actually add anything onto the helmets, I give them a sanding for less obvious reasons. But after I'm done sanding them, I put spot putty on the helmets. And I usually either give it a good priming or spot putty first. For this one, I just went with spot putty. So, this is, sometimes when I add spot putty on these helmets, I get these little cracks when it comes to these things. So that's why when I put spot putty on helmets, I gotta make sure that I spread it evenly. After I'm done sanding all the spot putty, I add this thing called filler primer. Now, I use this very often when it comes to these helmets, and it's definitely a good basis for things like this. Now, even though this helmet looks pretty good right now, I have to sand it even more and add more spot putty because you're not gonna get this done right the first time. So, this is what I'm doing right here. Just giving it a good sanding, and then after I clean up some of the dust, I give it another priming session. So this Rust-Oleum right here, gloss, is better than most white paints that I've used in the past, better than Krillon, and I gotta say I really like this one, so that came out good. Now I start taping the helmet, but for references I go on here and look up Captain Keeli, and the only real complicated part about this are, I'm not sure what they're called, but I think they're horns, I'm just not sure. But yeah, that is the only real difficult part about this. The rest of him is actually pretty basic. I just cut 2 strips of tape to make one line on the right, and do the same on the other side. He's also got, I'm not sure what they are on the sides, but that's also something I had to take into account. So, what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to put some strips of lines on the horns, and that should be it. After that, I have this color right here called Satin Brick, and I cannot believe how close to this it actually is to Captain Keeli's color. This color was meant for Boba Fett when I got it, and although it might not have done its job well, it certainly did its job here. So after the helmet looks pretty good, I let it sit for about 1 or 2 hours, and because I'm not that patient, I decided to go and take off the paint. And you can remove the paint without any significant damage, it's only you have to be very careful, otherwise you're going to peel away the paint that you left on. And I only had one little problem, and that was on, I believe, the left side. And it's hardly noticeable. So now it's time to add the Hobart face shield, and I've had this one for a good amount of time, so adding it on is not going to be too hard. I hot glued these things for the very reason I made 3D printed helmets. So after the helmet looks good, we still need to add the antenna for the helmet, or the rangefinder. So for that, we're just going to 3D print these things, and after giving my things a good sanding, that's when I could begin to add spot putty and then prime it. The reason I sand things first is because if I sand too much on the primer or the spot putty, I'll dig deep and hit layer lines. So to account for this, I sand these things first, that way there won't be much left after I sand these things. Alright, so I kind of put too much spot putty on the antenna end right there, but other than that, that's sandable, so it's not too hard. And I only give this about 1 go and then sand it because it's not too complicated. These things don't have that much detail compared to most things, but they are kind of small and they cause me to sand a little more than I expected. But after giving these a good gloss, I begin to add this onto the helmet with simple hot glue. And I didn't super glue the antenna to the base right there, but that's fine. So now it's time to weather the helmet. I give this thing a nice pass with fine grit sandpaper, which means it's got, I think, 1,000. The reason I do that is because I want to fade some of these things. And I also use 50 grit sandpaper to make some scratches that will leave indents on the helmet. After that, I gave it a coat of where I added some black paint with, and that adds for weathering and the effect that it's been in grit and some dirt. After all of that, the helmet looks pretty good and it's time to put it on. And this is only my second Phase 1 helmet I've ever made, but it's definitely one of my favorites. It's a little snug, but I did kind of make this for my head size a couple months ago, so I don't know. But yeah, this was a project that I put on hold, and I was like, this has been too long, I gotta get this done. So out of every helmet that I've made a lot of Phase 2 helmets, almost a dozen. But I've only ever made 2 of these Phase 1s. And I kind of would like to do more. However, my CR10 right now at the moment is a little busted, so that might take a while. But I do have plans to make a different kind of thing. I'm not sure what to call it though, because if it's flexible, it's a mask. If it's solid, it's a helmet, but you know how it goes. With that being said, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe. I always appreciate when you guys subscribe to the channel because we've been growing a lot, and that's always something to be appreciated about. And I'm just glad that I finally finished this because I've been debating on when to finish it, and it was just a good time.